the night of the Forgotten Inmate. It began with a scream, not just a cry of pain, but a scream that carried terror, betrayal, and the certain knowledge that no help was coming. The sound echoed through one of the dim hallways of Rikers Island, New York's notorious jail. Prisoners pressed their faces to bars, trying to see. Guards hesitated. For a moment, the whole block held its breath. Inside one cell, a young inmate lay crumpled on the floor. His hands were tied behind his back with torn sheets. His face was swollen, purple around the eyes. His ribs rose and fell in shallow, broken breaths. His neighbors whispered through cracks in their doors. "They're finishing him." Another voice hissed back, "Shut up or you're next." By morning, the man was gone. His bed stripped bare, his name erased from the call list. The paperwork said nothing. No release, no transfer, no death. It was as if he had never been there at all. This was Rikers Island's darkest truth. A place where lives weren't just crushed, they were erased. And the question that haunted every inmate who survived was simple. How many others had disappeared? Their stories buried in silence? A prison that eats people alive. To understand Rikers' darkness, you have to see the place for what it is. Rikers Island is not just a jail. It's a world cut off from New York City, floating in the East River between Queens and the Bronx. Nearly 400 acres of razor wire, guard towers, and sprawling complexes that hold thousands of men and women. On paper, it's a temporary place, a holding center where people wait for trial or serve short sentences. But inside, time twists, days blur into weeks, weeks into years, and survival becomes the only focus. The cells reek of sweat and mildew. In the summer, the air feels heavy, trapped, impossible to breathe. Men strip to their boxers and lie on concrete floors, searching for relief from the heat. In the winter, the cold bites harder than the steel bars. Thin blankets do little to stop the shivering. Food, the most basic of needs, becomes a humiliation. Trays slide under the bars with stale bread, soupy slop, or gray meat that tastes of nothing but salt and grease. Sometimes mold spreads across the crust. Sometimes roaches crawl across the trays. To be fed at Rikers is to be reminded daily that survival, not dignity, is the goal. Violence lurks everywhere. A wrong glance, a careless word, or being in the wrong gang's territory can spark a fight. Blood stains in the corner of the rec yard, whispered rumors of shank attacks in the showers, guards dragging bodies down the hall. But even this, inmates say, is not the worst part. The worst part is what follows afterward. Silence. A body disappears. A name vanishes from the records. The prison doesn't just punish, it erases. Whispers of a blacklist circulate. Inmates who cross certain lines, by refusing orders, by talking back, or by knowing too much, are targeted. Some end up in solitary. Some end up beaten. Others simply vanish. One of those stories begins with a young man named Curtis, 23 years old, locked up on a minor charge. Not a gang member, not a notorious criminal, just unlucky. He refused the guard's order one night. That defiance was enough. He was dragged into solitary confinement, the box. And once you enter the box, you either come out broken or you don't come out at all. The box. Solitary confinement in Rikers is a world of shadows. Prisoners call it the box. A single cell, 6 by 9 feet, steel bed, toilet, no window, no sound but your own breath. For some, it lasts weeks. For others, months. The human mind unravels inside the box. Men bang their heads against the walls. They scratch their arms until they bleed, just to feel something. Some scream into the night until their voices collapse. Others sit in silence, eyes blank, their sanity slowly leaking away. Curtis entered the box after a shouting match with a guard. At first, he yelled, cursed, tried to fight the isolation. But after days in the dark, his voice grew quieter. Other inmates heard him whispering to himself, praying, calling out for someone who never came. One night, Curtis screamed that he couldn't breathe. His neighbors pounded their doors, shouting for help. Instead of aid, they heard the heavy footsteps of boots. The door creaked open, and then came the sounds, thuds of fists, cracks of batons, the muffled cry of a man pinned to the ground. Then silence. By dawn, Curtis was gone, his cell stripped bare, his mattress missing. The guards claimed he had been transferred. But no one ever saw him again. The whispers spread to the blocks like wildfire. They took Curtis. He's gone. He knew too much. And that silence, that disappearance, lit a fuse. The Riot Sparks. The story of Curtis' disappearance spread like poison through the prison. In the mess hall, men leaned close, whispering his name. In the yard, eyes darted toward guards with anger and fear. Rumors swelled. Curtis wasn't transferred. He was buried. By evening, tension snapped. A fight broke out in the mess hall. At first, it was fists thrown between rival groups. But then, something changed. Instead of turning on each other, the inmates turned on the guards. Food trays flew. Chairs crashed. Guards rushed in swinging batons, spraying clouds of pepper spray that burned eyes and throats. Inmates coughed, stumbled, but they didn't stop. They surged together, pushing back. The noise was deafening, metal clanging, bodies colliding, screams echoing. The riot grew so large it spilled into the corridors. Doors rattled as men inside cells shouted, kicked, and banged, demanding to be let out. The entire block pulsed with chaos. And then something happened that terrified the administration more than the riot itself. A guard's keys went missing. The vanished keys. Keys at Rikers are power. They open cell doors, gates, entire blocks. For an inmate to have them is the worst-case scenario. When the riot ended, the missing keys sent the prison into a frenzy. Guards stormed to the halls, dragging inmates out, lining them against the walls. Cells were ripped apart. Mattresses sliced open. Toilets checked. Any man who resisted was beaten bloody. Some said the keys were never stolen at all, just an excuse for the crackdown. Others swore they saw the keys pass from hand to hand during the riot. But no one confessed, and no keys were ever found. Days of lockdown followed. Men were denied yard time. Visits were canceled. Phones went dead. Inmates sat in their cells, stewing in the heat, whispering about who had the keys and what they might unlock. Then, one night, an inmate was discovered in the showers. His face bruised, his ribs broken. He was unconscious, barely breathing. The word spread fast. He had known something about the keys, and now he'd been silenced. That was enough to push the prison to its breaking point. The midnight beating. It happened after midnight. Guards in riot gear moved silently down the tier, their boots thudding like drums. They pulled 4 men from their cells, shackled and cuffed. The rest of the block was ordered to stay silent. But silence didn't stop the sounds. The thuds of batons against flesh. The muffled cries. The crack of boots driving into ribs. The beatings echoed through the corridor. Inmates pressed their ears to the steel, whispering prayers, fighting tears. Everyone knew what this was. Punishment, not for crimes in court, but for what had happened inside Rikers. The 4 men never came back. Some whispered they had been sent to solitary. Others said they disappeared, just like Curtis. By dawn, Rikers was in full lockdown. No visits, no phone calls, no movement. The island had gone dark. And once again, the truth of what happened inside those walls was buried in silence. Silence and solitary. The morning after the midnight beatings, Rikers was eerily quiet. Entire blocks were locked down. The usual noise, shouting, metal clanging, the buzz of anger in the air, was gone. The silence was heavy, almost unnatural. It meant only one thing: retaliation. Guards patrolled in groups, their eyes scanning every face. Inmates sat still, trying not to draw attention. But inside solitary, the screams hadn't stopped. The 4 men taken the night before were rumored to be there, locked away in windowless cages. Prisoners who had spent time in solitary knew what that meant. Days without light. Meals shoved through a slot. No phone calls, no visits. No chance to breathe air that wasn't recycled through vents. Some said the 4 men were alive, but broken. Others claimed they never made it past the night. And then, a chilling discovery spread through whispers. One of the men's names had already been removed from the roster. Once again, Rikers had swallowed someone whole, the Whistleblower. Inside every prison, there are inmates who watch more than they speak. At Rikers, one of them was a man named Torres. He was older, quieter, and served as a sort of jailhouse lawyer, writing grievances and helping others file complaints. Torres had been keeping notes, detailed accounts of disappearances, beatings, and cover-ups. He claimed to know the truth about Curtis, about the vanished keys, even about the 4 men dragged away at midnight, and he wasn't afraid to talk. One evening, Torres passed a letter through the cracks of his cell door, telling another inmate to get it to his lawyer on the outside. The letter named guards, detailed times, even listed blocks where men had disappeared. But the letter never made it out. The inmate who carried it was stopped during a shakedown. Guards ripped the paper to shreds in front of him. That night, Torres was moved, his cell emptied, his bed stripped. By morning, no one knew where he was. The boiling point. Torres' disappearance lit another fuse. By now, the prison was on edge. Every inmate knew the truth. Speak up, and you disappear. The pressure cooker finally burst in the recreation yard. 2 rival gangs, normally enemies, suddenly united against the guards. Rocks, makeshift blades, and fists turned the yard into a battlefield. Guards fired pepper spray and rubber bullets. Alarms wailed. Sirens echoed through the island. Helicopters circled overhead as backup teams rushed in. The fight was brutal. Men were dragged across the yard, coughing and bleeding. Some were carried out on stretchers. But in the chaos, something else happened. A group of inmates broke through a gate, rushing toward an administrative hallway. They didn't escape, but for a few minutes, freedom was closer than it had ever been. And that taste of almost escape was enough to terrify the system into its next move. The crackdown. The response was merciless. Entire blocks were locked down for weeks. Inmates were stripped, searched, and beaten. Cells were raided, belongings destroyed. Guards in riot gear patrolled day and night, their boots echoing against the concrete. Food rations grew smaller. Showers were cut off. The prison became a place of suffocating stillness. Inmates whispered through vents, trading rumors about transfers, deaths, and secret burials. Some swore that bodies were being smuggled off the island in unmarked vans. Others claimed the disappeared were hidden in forgotten sublevels of the complex. But one thing was clear. Anyone connected to the riots, the letters, or the missing keys had vanished. The message was simple. Rikers wasn't just about punishment. It was about erasing problems before the world could see them. And just when the island seemed to fall into silence again, another event shattered the calm. The burning cell. Late one night, smoke began to seep from a cell in one of the oldest blocks. Inmates pounded their doors, shouting for help. The alarms blared, but response was slow. Too slow. Flames licked up the walls. The prisoner inside screamed until his voice broke. Others shouted his name. Try and keep him awake. Try and make sure he wasn't erased like the others. By the time guards arrived, the cell was engulfed. The fire was put out, but the man inside was gone. His body charred, unrecognizable. The official report called it an accident. They claimed the inmate had set the fire himself. But whispers told a different story, that the man had been one of Curtis' friends, one of the last people still asking questions. The fire wasn't an accident. It was a warning. And for the rest of Rikers, it was proof that the island would go to any lengths to keep its darkest secrets buried. The vanishing paperwork. After the fire, the prison scrambled to write its official story. Reports were typed, statements prepared, but something strange kept happening. Entire pages went missing. The incident log that listed the fire? Gone. The list of inmates who were supposed to be in that block? Missing names. Medical records of the burned inmate? Vanished. Lawyers on the outside filed motions, demanding answers. Families of inmates called for investigations. But every request ran into the same wall. We have no record of that. Inside Rikers, inmates understood what was happening. It wasn't incompetence. It was design. The prison had become a machine for erasing evidence. And then one guard made a mistake. He left a folder unattended on his desk. Inside were copies of older incident reports, beatings, riots, even Curtis' transfer. In black marker, across the top of one page, was a single word, Buried. The folder disappeared the next morning. The guard was reassigned, and the island sank back into silence. The missing bus. Every week, buses carried inmates to and from court in Manhattan. Families would wait, hoping to catch a glimpse of their sons, brothers, fathers. But one week, a bus never arrived. It had left Rikers in the morning, loaded with inmates scheduled for hearings. It never showed up in Manhattan. Hours passed. The families waited. Lawyers made calls. Judges demanded answers. The prison issued a statement. The transport was delayed due to mechanical issues. But inside the island, rumors swirled. Men claimed the bus had never left the gate. Others swore it had returned empty. The inmates unloaded and taken elsewhere. For days, the missing men didn't appear on any roster. No one could account for them. It was as if the bus had vanished into thin air. When they finally resurfaced weeks later, their bodies bore the marks of beatings. Bruises, broken ribs, scars that told a story the paperwork never would. The message was clear. The bus wasn't missing. It had been used. The hunger strike. By now, the fear inside Rikers had turned into something else. Desperation. A group of inmates decided to fight the only way they could. By refusing food, they declared a hunger strike. Dozens joined, their voices spreading through the blocks. We won't eat until they stop disappearing us. At first, guards ignored them. Then they mocked them. But as days passed, the hunger strike grew. Men grew weaker, collapsing in their cells. Lawyers caught wind of it, and the media started asking questions. That was the last thing the administration wanted. One morning, officers stormed the block with trays in hand. Men were forced to the ground, restrained, and fed through tubes shoved into their noses. Some choked, some bled. The hunger strike ended, but its echo lingered. The inmates had learned one thing. Even silence could be weaponized. And the prison had learned another. The men were willing to die to tell the truth. The journalist. Outside the island, whispers began to reach the press. One journalist, a woman named Daniels, decided to investigate. She filed requests for records, interviewed families, tracked court cases. She published articles calling Rikers a black hole of accountability. Her words gained traction. People began to notice. But as her reporting dug deeper, the walls began to close in. She received anonymous calls warning her to stop. Her sources inside the prison suddenly went silent. One lawyer she had interviewed reported being followed home. Then, one night, Daniel's car was found abandoned near the East River. Her laptop was missing. Her notes were gone. The police called it a personal matter. But those who had read her articles knew better. She had gotten too close to Rikers' darkest secrets. And like the inmates inside, her voice had been buried. The tunnels. Among the oldest legends of Rikers are the tunnels. Forgotten service passages, maintenance shafts, and rumored escape routes beneath the island. Most inmates dismissed them as myths. But after the journalist's disappearance, whispers returned. Men claimed to hear movement under their cells at night, boots on concrete, voices in the dark. One inmate, working in laundry detail, swore he saw a hatch in the floor of an unused building. Guards pulled him away before he could open it. Another claimed the tunnels weren't for escape at all, but for transfers. Inmates who vanished from the records were taken below and never seen again. The stories sounded insane. But at Rikers, where men disappeared every week, nothing seemed impossible anymore. And when the floor of one old block collapsed during repairs, revealing a dark, concrete shaft beneath, the legend felt less like rumor and more like truth. The ghost roster. By now, inmates had stopped trusting the call sheets. Every morning, guards shouted names for court appearances, transfers, and work assignments. But more and more often, men noticed something chilling. Names missing. A friend who ate breakfast with you yesterday? Gone from the list. A cellmate who argued with a guard? Erased. A man who whispered too much about Curtis or Torres or the journalist? Deleted. They called it the ghost roster. Men joked nervously about it at first. If your name disappears, so do you. But soon it wasn't a joke. The fear became unbearable. Inmates refused to sleep deeply, afraid they'd wake to find their name erased. Some scrawled their names on the walls in chalk, desperate proof that they existed. And one night, when the roster skipped 10 names in a row, the whole block erupted, pounding doors, screaming, refusing to quiet down. The silence afterward was worse than the screams. Because in Rikers, silence meant another story had been buried. The secret block, rumors of hidden tunnels weren't the only whispers. Some inmates spoke of an entire secret block. They described a wing with no official designation, tucked between administrative offices. No visitors allowed. No court appearances from those who entered. A man who worked cleaning detail swore he'd seen it. He was taken to mop a hallway he'd never been down before. The air was stale, colder. Behind the doors, he heard muffled cries, but no names were listed on the cells. Just numbers. He told others when he got back to his block. Days later, he vanished. The legend of the secret block spread like wildfire. Some believe it was where problem inmates were taken. Others thought it was a medical unit where experiments were carried out. But the truth was simpler and scarier. It was a place to hide men who officially didn't exist. And if the secret block was real, then Rikers wasn't just a jail. It was a black site, a place designed to bury people alive. The breaking point. By now, the prison had become unbearable. Inmates were breaking under pressure. Some refused to leave their cells, even for meals. Others snapped, attacking guards in blind rage. One afternoon, a man climbed the bars of his cell and began to scream names, dates, places. Curtis, Torres, Daniels, they're still here. His voice shook the block. Guards rushed in. Batons cracked. Blood splattered. The man was dragged out, limp, never to return. But the damage was done. His words echoed in the ears of every inmate who heard them. Curtis, Torres, Daniels. The names lived on, even if the people didn't. And that made them dangerous. The administration had to stamp it out. And they chose the only weapon left, total lockdown. The island shuts down. For weeks, Rikers became a ghost island. No visits allowed. No outside calls. Court appearances postponed. Helicopters circled above, guarding the waters. Barges patrolled the river. The prison became a sealed vault. Inside, men were left to rot. Meals grew smaller. Tension boiled. The silence was deafening. Some tried to resist by banging their doors in unison, creating thunder across the blocks. Others scratched names into the walls, leaving marks in case they disappeared. But the guards' control was absolute. Anyone who protested was dragged away. And then, just as suddenly as it began, the lockdown ended. Court visits resumed. Phone calls allowed. But dozens of men were missing, gone. And once again, the paperwork said nothing. The last whisper, the final story, came from an inmate who was released after years inside. His name is withheld for his safety, but his words are among the few glimpses we have into what Rikers buries. He spoke of Curtis, who never left the box, Torres, who wrote letters that never made it out, the journalist Daniels, who disappeared after digging too deep. He spoke of buses that never arrived, names erased, tunnels in the dark, secret blocks. And then he said something that chills anyone who hears it. They didn't want us locked up. They wanted us forgotten. And once you're forgotten, you never come back. Buried in silence. Rikers Island stands as one of the most infamous jails in the world. To the public, it is overcrowded, violent, and broken. But to those who lived inside, it is something worse, a machine for burying lives. Men vanish without record. Paperwork dissolves. Families search for answers that never come. And even when voices rise, through hunger strikes, riots, or journalism, the silence of the island swallows them whole. The stories of Curtis, Torres, Daniels, and countless others remain shadows, passed in whispers through vents and cell bars. Their truth never fully told, their names never written in the official record. But here, in the voices of those who survived, their memories live on. And that is the true dark side of Rikers. Not just the violence, not just the suffering, but the silence of lives erased, stories buried, and truths that may never be uncovered. The island keeps its secrets well. But secrets, no matter how deep they're buried, have a way of clawing back to the surface. The question is, when they finally do, will the world be ready to listen?